Can you imagine working your whole life, giving everything you have to something you love, only to be told you should walk away? Just pack it up and retire. It's hard to even picture, right? But that's exactly what happened to Johnny Depp, one of Hollywood's most beloved and iconic actors, when he was quietly pushed out of a role that he had poured his heart and soul into. It's a story that still stings for his fans. And maybe, in a way, you've been there too. Maybe you felt that same kind of heartbreak, being pushed out of something you cared deeply about, being told you're no longer needed, no longer wanted. If you've ever felt like that, you're not alone, and neither was Johnny. So today, let's sit down and talk about what really happened when Johnny Depp was recast in the Fantastic Beasts movies. Why did it happen? How did he respond? And most importantly, what can all of us learn from the way he handled one of the toughest chapters in his career? Because even though this is a Hollywood story, at its heart, it's really a human story. Let's take it back to the beginning, before all the controversy, when everything seemed to be going right. In 2016, when Warner Bros. Announced that Johnny Depp would play the dark wizard Gellert Grindelwald in their Harry Potter spin-off franchise, Fantastic Beasts, fans were surprised but also excited. This was Johnny Depp, after all, a man who had built his entire career on bringing strange, complex, and unforgettable characters to life. From Edward Scissorhands to Captain Jack Sparrow, to Willy Wonka. Johnny had a knack for making you believe in the unbelievable. He could take even the weirdest role and make it real, make it human. And with Grindelwald, he did exactly that. When the second film, Fantastic Beasts, The Crimes of Grindelwald, came out, Johnny's performance was chilling. He made Grindelwald terrifying, yes, but also oddly charismatic. You could see why people in that magical world might follow him. He wasn't just a villain you hated. He was a villain you couldn't take your eyes off of. That's what Johnny does best, he brings depth to characters, even when they're dark. But behind the scenes, his personal life was becoming a very different kind of story. Around that same time, Johnny was going through a bitter, very public legal battle that played out in courtrooms and tabloid headlines all over the world. Every detail of his private life was suddenly on display for millions of strangers to pick apart. And no matter what the truth was, no matter what was really happening, the court of public opinion had already begun its trial. And in Hollywood, perception often matters more than reality. So, while Johnny was still giving incredible performances and showing up to work, the studio began to feel the pressure. Warner Bros., like many big corporations, started worrying about the image of their franchise. The whispers grew louder. Would families still go see a movie with Johnny Depp's name attached to it? Would the controversy hurt ticket sales? And then, before filming began on the third Fantastic Beasts movie, Johnny was called into a meeting. That meeting changed everything. Johnny would later share that they didn't just ask him to step aside, they suggested, very clearly, that it might be better if he simply retired altogether. Think about that for a moment. Being told to retire. After decades of building a career filled with unforgettable characters, unforgettable moments, being told you're finished. For someone like Johnny, who lives and breathes his art, who pours everything he is into every role, that must have been devastating. And yet, the way he handled it says so much about who he is. Instead of exploding in anger or trashing the studio publicly, he chose his words carefully. He didn't lash out. He didn't call for boycotts or badmouth his replacement. He simply walked away, with grace. In his statement to fans, he wrote that he respected the studio's decision, even though he disagreed with it. He thanked his supporters, promised to keep fighting for the truth in his personal life, and then quietly left the role behind. That kind of composure isn't easy. Especially when the whole world is watching. Especially when you feel wronged. But that's Johnny, he's always carried himself differently. After Johnny's exit, the studio brought in Mads Mikkelsen to play Grindelwald in The Secrets of Dumbledore. And here's the thing, Mads is a phenomenal actor. Nobody can deny that. He's talented, charismatic, and brought his own unique take to the role. Some fans loved it. But for many others, it just wasn't the same. Something about Johnny's version, the eerie unpredictability, the way you could feel the pain and rage behind Grindelwald's eyes, was missing. Fans online started campaigns calling for Johnny to be reinstated. Social media hashtags like hashtag Justice for Johnny Depp and hashtag Bring Back Johnny trended for weeks. But the studio didn't budge. And yet, Johnny didn't let any of that stop him. He moved forward. He focused on his music, on his art, on connecting with fans who stood by him. He kept showing up, proving to himself, and to everyone else, that one studio's decision didn't define his worth, or his future. And that's a lesson for all of us. Sometimes, people will tell you it's time to walk away. That you're no longer good enough. That you should retire, step aside, let someone else take your place. And in those moments, you have a choice. You can believe them. Or you can believe in yourself. Johnny chose to believe in himself. Even in the face of immense pressure, public scrutiny, and heartbreak, he kept going. He stayed creative. He stayed connected. He stayed true to who he is. And that's what sets someone like Johnny apart. Most people in his situation would have crumbled. They would have lashed out, made enemies, or simply faded away into silence. But not Johnny. He understood something many of us forget when life gets messy: the only thing you really have control over is how you respond. And he chose to respond with grace. It's easy to be kind and composed when everything's going your way. When you're winning awards, getting standing ovations, being praised at every turn, of course, you smile, you're gracious, you thank everyone. But when you feel like the whole world is against you, when people you thought were in your corner turn their backs, when strangers on the internet tear you apart without even knowing you, that's when your true character is revealed. And in those darkest moments, Johnny showed incredible strength. He didn't run to the press to smear the studio that let him go. He didn't launch into angry social media tirades. He didn't beg for pity. Instead, he quietly thanked his fans. He focused on his music. He painted. He took photos with people who showed up for him. He didn't just keep working, he kept connecting. Because to him, it was never just about the big Hollywood machines, the glittering premieres, the endless cameras. It was always about the people. The people who believed in him, who felt something real when they watched his performances, who sent letters and stood in line just to tell him his work meant something to them. And here's another thing he taught us: stay classy. Even when you feel hurt. Even when you're angry. Because how you carry yourself in hard times says more about you than any role you'll ever play. It's tempting to fight fire with fire, isn't it? When someone wrongs you, the first instinct is to strike back, to prove you're right, to tear them down like they tore you down. But Johnny didn't do that. He didn't need to. He knew his worth. And he knew that dignity is something no one can take from you unless you let them. That's why, even when others doubted him, people who mattered still stood by him. His quiet strength became a beacon for others going through their own storms. Fans rallied. They sent messages of support. They wore shirts with his face on them to premieres. Because they saw a man who didn't let hate make him hateful. Who didn't let heartbreak make him bitter. Who didn't let injustice make him cruel. Johnny never tried to tear anyone down to lift himself back up. And that kind of quiet strength is what makes people respect you in the long run. Because it shows integrity. It shows humility. It shows a deeper kind of courage than yelling ever could. People will forget what awards you won or what movies you made, but they'll never forget how you made them feel, especially when you were at your lowest. So now, I want to ask you something. Honestly, if you were in his shoes, how would you have handled it? Would you have walked away quietly, keeping your head high even as your heart broke? Or would you have fought loudly, demanding justice, calling out every slight and betrayal? There's no easy answer. We're all human. But maybe, just maybe, there's something to be said for the path Johnny chose, the path of quiet strength, of resilience, of letting your work and your character speak louder than your words ever could. Maybe that's a lesson worth holding on to the next time life tries to push you down. If you were in Johnny's shoes, what would you have done? Would you have stayed quiet and walked away with dignity? Or would you have fought harder to keep your place? There's no right or wrong answer, but it's worth thinking about. And if this story resonates with you, if it's inspired you even just a little, then I hope you'll carry that lesson forward in your own life. Don't let anyone else decide when your story ends. Don't let anyone else tell you when it's time to quit. Because your story is yours to write. And if you've enjoyed hearing Johnny's story, don't forget to like this video and subscribe. We've got plenty more stories coming your way about stars, and everyday people, who stood strong when life got tough. Stories that remind you just how much strength you really have inside you. Oh, and one last thing before you go. No matter what anyone else says, never forget this, your best chapter could still be ahead of you. Thanks for spending this time with me. I'll see you in the next one.